check, check. 1, 2. Beyond Capers. Matt McKibbin. That's Chance's face, but that's cool. Is Chance here? No. I'm Matt McKibbin, and we're going to be talking about Beyond Capers, Gatekeepers and Communities of the Future, which is a little bit general, but I think that these gentlemen here are going to be able to fill the time pretty well. So to start the panel out, I think it would be great for you guys to introduce yourself and talk about what you're working on.
Sure. My name is Carty. I started a ISP, and I'm also working on a project that we'll call Decentralized Internet.
I am Larry Sanger. I'm co-founder of Wikipedia, and I'm now the Chief Information Officer of Everpedia, the encyclopedia of everything, and which will be the first encyclopedia network on the blockchain. And actually, here I'm going to be talking a little bit about decentralizing Facebook, basically. So.
I'm excited for that.
Colin Pape. I am the founder of Presearch. We are building a decentralized search engine, the people's search engine as we like to think of it, and look forward to the talk.
Awesome. So I want to start out, I mean, the internet right now is obviously filled with massive amounts of centralized gatekeepers that are owning our data, are kind of creating some bias in our searches and potentially even filtering things and not being like neutral to our data. Where do you see that now, and are we at kind of a turning point? Where do you see that going in the future? Colin can start.
Sure, yeah. It does seem to be a bit of a backlash that's been brewing. I think, you know, the big gatekeepers, they are just so big. Google's controlling 95% of searches, for instance, in North America right now. They're kind of the top level of access to all information. And it's not everybody yet, but there's, you know, maybe 5 to 10% of Google users are starting to feel like there's just, you know, a lack of transparency. There's too much information under one roof. A lot of different services that are being offered that compete with others in the marketplace and are owned by Google and are being preferenced. And yeah, it seems like there's a bit of a turning point that's starting to happen, a groundswell where people are feeling like there needs to be some change. And with the rise of blockchain, I think there's a huge opportunity right now to build out more open, transparent, community-driven, ground-up services that can, you know, augment or replace some of those centralized services. So it's an exciting time.
Can you repeat the question?
I just said, like, right now, with where we have the internet, we have a lot of very centralized organizations, Google and Facebook and Amazon, controlling a lot of the narrative and having a lot of the power over what we look at when we go onto the internet. Specifically, I would say, if I Googled something, a specific topic on Google, I don't think that I've ever seen the page Everpedia pop up. Right, I didn't know that really was a thing until the announcement on EOS. So where are we now, and where do you see the pain points of these centralized gatekeepers?
Right. I think where we are right now, I mean, he said it very well. We're in a point where people are finally starting to see that there are serious consequences to our having shared so much information under rules that we don't control, basically. And it is absolutely true that Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Google exert too much control over what they do with our information and how we distribute it, or how it is distributed to us. So I think there's, going forward, I hope, and obviously there's always a whole raft at any given time of Facebook competitors, for example, right? But I think perhaps now we will have a real reason to invest a lot of time, money, energy into doing it, and sort of as a society figuring out what it should look like.
Like the hat, decentralized Facebook.
Yeah, so I think you guys hit very good points on you know, the recent issues with Facebook and Cambridge Analytica, but just going forward, I think that's an important part, right? Especially in this space, in the blockchain space, the things that we can do to align with our customers for some of these projects, right? How we can utilize decentralization as an incentive, how we can provide tokens as an incentive in some cases, or a utility, right? To align ourselves better with the end users that Facebook, Twitter, and all the other monoliths have a death grip on, right? So going forward, I think it's very important for the group here and the developers to really begin to focus on that, the startups to focus on that and figure out how we can kind of wiggle our way in there and kind of grow to be something that eventually overcomes them, right?
So sticking, there's a kind of a follow-up question. There's a massive campaign right now, some of the whistleblowers that have come out of Cambridge Analytica and Facebook, Brittany Kaiser, there's a hashtag Own Your Data campaign. Do you believe that your data is your property and should be regulated as such?
Well, yeah, just to start, yes. I mean, it is obvious. It is your property, right? It's everything you do. I think we've had several conversations and examples, especially with just listening to pre-search and things around them. You've got the example of the Google timeline. I don't know if anyone's seen that. That's just crazy that you can literally see where you've been in your history. And that information is yours, right? You should have a right to say to someone else if or not they could use that or sell that if you want to, or just not. So I'll let you take it from there. The answer is simply yes.
Yeah, I think it's totally important that we recognize not just that our data is our property, but that these huge companies that collect data from us make it possible to search search through, and APIs for individuals to actually access. Facebook makes it very difficult, for example, to find our old posts, and if you really want to go through it all, then you have to download a data dump, which is, you know, megabytes long, and then, you know, use some sort of tool to process, and that's not how it should be at all. You know, you should not have to be given the runaround for that kind of thing.
You just have a complicated life. You know? Complicated life. That's why it's so complicated to get all your data. You have a complicated life.
I'm sorry.
I was joking. I said you have a complicated life. That's why it's so difficult to get all your data.
Right.
Yeah, I think one of the interesting kind of underlying challenges, I mean, so the Google timeline that you brought up, so if anybody isn't familiar, you can go to maps.google.com/timeline, and if you have location services enabled on your mobile device, you can see exactly where you've been, whether you're running that application or not. So I recently explored mine and realized, you know, the amount of information that had been collected. It's inferring the transportation type that you're taking and everything. It's pretty weird and visceral when you actually see it. And, you know, Google's been decent enough about showing you that, and you can go in and you know, delete your information supposedly. You know, possibly the same thing with Facebook. That's really the problem, though, with decentralized services and the inability to really look under the hood at all, because it's not open source, it's not really transparent, is that you're trusting even that, let's say, that information has been deleted. And we really don't know that. And I've seen things with those services and other services where it says it's been deleted, but, you know, to people who don't know how databases work, oftentimes deleted versus undeleted is just, you know, changing a 1 to a 0, and the record still remains. And so it's, you know, I think ensuring that the policies are there and that they're super clear, but then ultimately, you know, to be able to like actually audit that and know, is it actually being deleted? Is it being respected? Where is it being shipped off to? Who else has backdoor access to it? That kind of stuff. So until we have that level of visibility, we're simply trusting that whatever we're being told is true. And I think that poses a big problem, and that's the interesting opportunity for blockchain is, the more trustless environment as well as open source. And there's, I think, a big opportunity to start something, leverage, what has been done, the UIs that people have been trained to use and are now accustomed to, and build a bit of a different system where people can actually see what's going on under the hood.
So, I mean, we're seeing kind of a transition, at least for a lot of these models, from centralized business models to these decentralized token economies. And do you think that some of these companies like Facebook or like Google will eventually pivot and realize this and try to offer their own decentralized service? Because if Facebook did an ICO for their data, it would be a really big ICO, right? Do you think that they'll eventually take a look and pivot?
I saw you shaking your head, so I'll let you.
I don't think so. I mean, I just can't see Facebook trying to basically launch what would essentially be a competitor. They make all of their money on basically making data available about us. We are the product, as they say, right? And they are gatekeeping data about us is how they make their money. So how the way that it should work. Let me just sort of lay out my vision, if I may. This is not my startup. This is like an idea for anybody to develop and use and write about or whatever. But what we all ought to do is set up a new kind of smart contract where let's just be crazy and say when 100 million people sign up to, and they declare that they will put in 3 hours of their time over, say, a week on a qualifying social network when it comes available. It would work like this. You buy a token for maybe $5 or something like that, and you're staking it. You lose it if you don't actually do that 3 hours worth of work on the social network or whatever it would be. But if you do, then your token is multiplied by 10 or something like that, right? And then the idea is when there are 100 million sign-ups for this token, then all at once there is a kick-starting, the ball is rolling, and you have a critical mass.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like an interesting token economic model. There's a lot of blockchain entrepreneurs in the space in here in the room. Maybe someone want to take and do it. I guess a specific question. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to follow. I was actually going to answer as well.
Yeah, go ahead.
Just because it touches on the first point that I had, right? I feel that no matter the mechanism, no matter the startup or the approach or how it's done, what you see time and time again with larger companies, and I always reference the car manufacturing industry, right? GM to Toyota, or any other large industry, is that the incumbent players, they don't become complacent, but they're not as nimble, right? And so being in the space, we're small, we're all startups, we're very nimble, and so as we are changing the model, right, and we're changing that paradigm, and the user base is shifting, Facebook's going, oh, yeah, okay, whatever, they're over there in an aircraft carrier, right? So we don't have to worry about them. And then, a few months later, there goes like a quarter of their user base, and then they're like, oh, we may have a problem. And so it's very insidious as that shift happens. So they may not respond. None of the larger players may respond, but hopefully we give them something to respond to.
Change the business model.
Yeah. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think most of their users don't care, and so they don't have the incentive to make the change. They've got legacy, business models, legacy technical debt, and so I don't think they're going to, make the change. But I think it provides a really big opportunity to connect with the 5 to 10% of people, which is still hundreds of millions of people who do care and who do want an alternative, and to build something, you know, from the grassroots, ground up. Most likely you're going to connect with a lot of the influencers and the people that are, you know, building technology, building community, and get them on board with a new platform, and then they kind of, you know, become those early adopters and those innovators that you know, the rest of the people end up eventually following. I think that would be how it would happen, and so that's what generally happens in a lot of the legacy businesses. My other company, ShopCity.com, it's against the Yellow Pages, and you know, the Yellow Pages had every opportunity to be, you know, the new Google, or to monetize a huge percentage of Google's business, and they just couldn't get their act together. None of them could, because they had these legacy models that they had to protect. And so I have a feeling that it's going to be something similar. And I think, you know, sometimes they're not intentional in how they're, you know, operating. I think there's a lot of good people that work for a lot of these companies, and they don't necessarily intend to do what we sometimes see as being, you know, pretty malicious. I think it's just, you know, a legacy again of even their funding model. They took VC, huge amounts of VC. They didn't have the opportunity to do, you know, a crowdsource sale where they can get aligned with all of the stakeholders within their community. They had to kind of go down a path, you know, went from, you know, VC to public company. They've got one kind of bottom line. It's about profit, and so then that's what's driving all their behavior. This is a huge opportunity to keep everybody aligned and to build something that is going to work for everyone, I think.
All right, so we have about 3 more minutes left. I would say, we can ask the audience, but I would say, like, as this transition happens, and we all believe that this transition will happen and we will have decentralized solutions that are available to things, what do you think that is the timeline that we can say, we'd be sitting on this stage here and we would say, all right, we have robust systems for us to own all of our data and to have an actual robust software system, kind of like what Google's doing?
You know, those type of questions and videos that they play back like 5 years later, and we're sitting there like, shouldn't have said that.
What is the price of Bitcoin in a year right now?
Exactly. Larry? All right, no, I'll take it. You know, I can't put a timeline to it. Maybe I will at the end of this my 30 seconds here, right? But I think one of the things that's needed, one of the things I like in the space is building infrastructure. I think as the infrastructure grows, you know, on top of whatever blockchain it may be, just being able to actually like 2 presentations back about the developers, right, and the lack thereof. I think, you know, with the few developers that are there, building infrastructure that makes it easier for other developers to come on board, something like that would be the catalyst for you know, faster adoption and more apps and just better functionality across the space. So it's hard for me to put a time frame to it. When I start seeing that happening, I'll just say, oh, you know, 2 years. So I hope it's within, you know, 3 years or less, but
yeah, you guys are the ones building the solutions. I want to see how fast you're going to build them so I can use it.
Yeah, there's a saying, as humans, we overestimate what we can accomplish in a year, and we underestimate what we can accomplish in 5 years. I think that's probably the case here, and I think the way that this is going to build the momentum and be able to you know, replicate or create new software, new protocols is open source. You know, when you look at the number of employees that Google has, for instance, it's significant. But you know, the number of people, let's say, that are working on search, you know, we're estimating that there's under 10,000 people that are working on search. Well, if you had, you know, 100,000 people in an open source community, you can accomplish a lot in a shorter period of time. Many hands make light work.
I think that we might see a replacement for Facebook within the next couple of years even. And the reason for that, one reason to think that's the case, is that we are right now really aggressively developing the technology of content blockchains. So Steam did the big pioneering, and there's a second version of Steam in the works, and the guys at Block One are like really leading the way, and that is going to, basically, that's the technology that we need to make it happen. And then, because the way to make our data robustly decentralized and to make online communities robustly decentralized is, it requires that they not have a single, it's a tautology, right? It requires that they not have a single company behind them. It actually has to be distributed. But there hasn't been any effective implementation of that concept. I mean, peer-to-peer networking just didn't really do the job. And blockchain does, and it also built into that is an incentive layer for the builders and the participants. So, yeah, I think it's going to happen possibly sooner than you think.
Yeah, I think the one other factor, I know we're out of time, is just, you know, the ability to leverage the infrastructure that's already been created. You know, we don't have to create some of the stuff that some of these big guys created. In fact, we can completely leverage even the things that they have created kind of against themselves, which I think is interesting.
Perfect. Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.